Hi Year 6, this is a pre-lesson activity which should take between 10 to 15 minutes and will help you with today's English lesson. So I want you to think about, are there any words which you don't know the meaning of? What would you normally or usually do when you don't know the meaning of a word? Some of the words in our poem this week won't be in the dictionary as they are made up and might be unfamiliar as they are called portmanteau words. I wonder if you've heard of these before. Portmanteau means joining together two or more words in order to create an entirely new word. There are some examples on this PowerPoint. So smoke and fog is smog. Smog has the properties of both fog and smoke. A motor and hotel becomes motel, a hotel designed for motorists travelling from one place to another. Breakfast and lunch becomes brunch, a late morning meal eaten instead of breakfast and lunch. And a portmanteau used to be a large travelling bag typically made up of stiff leather and opening into two equal parts. I wonder if you can work out the connection between portmanteau words and the object which is called a portmanteau. These words appear in our poem today. Which two words might these be made up of? What do you think the meaning of these words might be? What words that you know do they sound like? The first one is frabjous. Then we've got galump, mimsy, slithy, and chortled. Jot down some of your ideas and then press the next slide to see if you're correct. Okay, let's see if you came up with the same ideas. So frabjous is a mixture of fabulous and joyous. Galump is a mixture of galloping and triumph. Mimsy means miserable and flimsy. Slithy is made up of slimy and lithe. Lithe means thin, supple and graceful. And chortled is a mixture of chuckled and snorted. All of these words will appear in the poem that we're reading today. Okay, welcome to another Monday morning, Year 6. It is Monday, June the 8th already, and we are going to be doing some work around a famous poem this week, which I think you're going to really enjoy. I'm really looking forward to teaching it. And the work that you're doing in your online home learning is going to be the same learning that we're doing with the Year 6s who are back in school. And what we'd really like you to do is, if you create any poems or any of your descriptions, we'd really like you to try and email them to your teacher, and then we can share them in class and maybe email you some feedback about what the children who are here thought about it. And it would be a really nice way of us all feeling a bit more connected. So I really hope that you enjoy the week, and I hope that you're staying safe, and we'll look forward to seeing what you create. Okay? The title of our poem this week is Jabberwocky. What do you think the poem will be about? And why do you think that? There is a copy of the poem on the website which you can open to read more easily or print out if you have access to a printer. Listen to the poem as I read it and jot down ideas about what you think each verse or stanza is about. You could underline words to help you work out what is happening if you would prefer. So remember, you are trying to work out what you think is happening in this poem. Think about the parts which you understand. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mom rats outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the maxim foe he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker, snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. O frabjous day, callooh, callay, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mom raths outgrabe. Hopefully you were able to understand and work out what was happening in some of that poem, perhaps all of it. You can see on this slide that I've summarised each verse for you to help. Verse 1 is describing the setting. In verse 2, a boy is given a warning about 3 creatures which sound dangerous with their claws that catch and jaws that bite. In verse 3, the boy takes a sword and looks for an enemy for a long time. He gets tired and rests by a tree. As he is thinking, in verse 4, a fierce creature called a Jabberwock appears. In verse 5, the boy takes his sword and kills the Jabberwock and cuts off the head. In verse 6, he returns and the man is very happy that the Jabberwock has been killed. And finally, in verse 7, we return to a description of the setting. This verse describes the setting, and it is repeated in verse 7. You're going to try and translate it. Think about the portmanteau words we looked at earlier, and think about the unfamiliar words which are in this verse. Do they sound like words you already know? What do they make you think about? See if you can work out what this verse might mean. You can write it down or keep the ideas in your head. Pause the slides whilst you try and translate this section. This is my translation. Yours might be very different depending on what images the words conjure up in your head. I thought about the portmanteau words and the rest of the poem and the type of setting that I thought this poem might be written in. So my translation is, it was a brilliant bright morning and the slimy springy reeds did dance and twist in the wind. All miserable and flimsy were the tree branches and the massive rats ran everywhere. I wonder what yours is like. Our main task today is we're going to create our own opening verse setting the scene for a poem based on the Jabberwocky. We'll write the rest through the week. You can choose from a marshy, wet, boggy place, a dark, dingy cave, perhaps a rainforest or a forest that you are familiar with, under the ocean or a location of your choice. You can use one of these pictures or you might want to find a picture on the internet. It's your choice. Next, you're going to create a brainstorm and add words and phrases which describe it. You can try and combine some of these and make up some portmanteau words to describe the setting and what you might find in it. You could also make up some nonsense words. Think about the different sounds of the different letters and the effect they could have on the images which are created in the reader's head. You can see that I selected the dark, dingy cave. I decided that it would be damp and murky, and then I tried to join those two words together and come up with different words that I might use in my poem. I've come up with mercamp, dampery, damky, and dirky. I decided it would be full of scary bats. What could I write instead of bats? I thought scats, scarts, batcrees, scrats. Then there are silhouettes and shadows. I might try and combine those two when I write the setting. I thought there might be spiders, lethal, deadly, hairy, huge, massive, fierce, and tried to join some of those up. Lethal, lethally, fiercive. You have a go and see if you can create some different words and some language to use in your poem. Pause the slides whilst you record your words and phrases to describe your particular location. This is my first and last verse for my poem. See if you think you can work out what it might be about. 'Twas Mercamp and the shrinkled blats did scrawl and squawkle in the glark. All speary were the shadowettes, and the deethal spithers racked. This is a translation of my verse. You might have come up with a different translation, which is fine. It was murky and damp, and the wrinkled, shrivelled bats did squawk and screech in the gloomy darkness. All spooky and eerie were the shadowed silhouettes, and the lethal, deadly spiders roared. Now it's your turn to try and write an opening and a closing verse for your poem based on your setting, using the words which you created in your brainstorm. Try and copy the structure from the Jabberwocky poem, and if you can, think about rhyming either lines 1 and 3 or 2 and 4. Here is a planning skeleton which you might find useful when you're writing your first and last verse. As I mentioned at the start of the lesson, we're going to be doing the same activities in class. So we would really love it if you could email your setting verse to your teacher, and we'll try and share it with the children in your class and see if we can work out the meaning behind some of your words and where we think it's set. We'll email you back some feedback and some suggestions. We're really looking forward to seeing your verses.